The Little Prince. What started as a little fantasy novella during World War II became one of the biggest phenomenons that ever came out of literature. Seriously, it's actually among one of the best-selling books of all time next to Lord of the Rings. Ever since its publication in 1943, there have been countless of adaptations throughout many different forms of entertainment. These include audio with vinyls, cassettes, and CDs, radio, TV shows, movies, graphic novels, and tons of stage shows for ballets, operas, musicals, and dramas. The Prince even tackled on many forms of animation, including a Japanese anime, Will Vinton's claymation, and even computer animation. However, that was all for TV. This time, in the hands of Kung Fu Panda director Mark Osborne, The Prince will be going into a big-budget animated feature. But will it have the same beauty as a rose, or will it crash down into the Sahara Desert? Let's find out. The story. Considering that we are dealing with such a legendary story, it's great to see that The Prince will finally be the subject of an animated feature. Too bad though that he isn't the star of his own godforsaken film. Instead, the story decided to give the Little Prince the same treatment that it gave the Lorax. The real story of the movie is actually about this little girl. And no, she doesn't even have a name. She would go move to this new house and would meet with this old aviator where he would tell her the original story. The whole purpose of these moments with the little girl is more to emphasize the message that the original story tries to say. They don't really seem that welcoming here because it's like if the movie doesn't feel like just telling the original story would be enough to convey the message. They need the CGI bits in order to spell it out to the audience. This unfortunately results the message to feel more forced upon and very unsubtle. Not only that, but it also gives the movie a rather unpleasant and predictable tone, and it only makes you wonder why is it even called The Little Prince when we barely see the Little Prince.
I made a friend.
If you study hard and you stay completely on track with the plan, you can spend some time with your new friend next summer.
The worst part of it all is that it also ends up being rather unnecessary, because what they did with the original story itself works extremely well. It stays true with the original story, and it really shows that it can tell its message on its own very properly. But then there's the third act of the film. Without spoiling too much, despite the tone to just spontaneously change in an instant, I do get what they're trying to do as a continuation to the original story. But again, the whole purpose of it feels like it wants to shove the message down the audience's throats. That, and when you think about a crucial moment at the end of the novel, this should not even happen in the first place. Now, I know I keep hitting it for how it tells its message, but what about the message itself? Well, unlike the Lorax, where it kinda misses the source material's point to say a generic moral, at least they do stay true to the message of the Little Prince to never forget who you actually are, even when it means to say the final goodbye. So, at the very least, there is a bit of heart and some respect to the original source material. There could be worse ideas to adapt the story, but this is far from being an ideal choice. The animation. Maybe the creative liberties weren't done so well in the writing, but some of the choices in the animation are actually very well done. Starting with the computer animation, since that takes the majority of the film, some could say that it is another element to push the message, since many of the backgrounds are made to look more plain and manufactured, while the aviator's house is a lot more different and colorful. It is only during the third act where the movie actually takes the bland business look and somehow turn it into something that's darkly whimsical. As for the character designs, you could tell a bit that the animators tried to stay true to the original drawings of Antoine de Saint-Exupery. It might not show as much to the little girl and the mother, But they did do some creative looks with the other characters like the Aviator. Even in the character animation itself, there isn't really much to complain since it is mostly down to earth, but there really isn't anything spectacular that stands out. Now, this could be your standard computer animation, but the movie decided to do something a little extra to make it really stand out. Every time it goes into the original story, it is completely done in stop motion, down to where every aspect was done by hand. In here, this is where you can see the true spirit of the Little Prince. Everything about it feels more minimal, where the designs stick more true to the book and is not even afraid to show what kind of materials the characters are made in order to show this fascinating style.
My taming you has done you no good at all.
Let me make you a present of a secret.
It pretty much gives another reason why this should have been more about the original story than, well, what we got. With what they did with the computer animation, it's fine. But with the combination of the stop motion, it actually makes things a lot more interesting to watch. The characters. I will say that there are some good characters here, they just don't appear as much as they probably should. So with that said, let's just get these guys out of the way. The little girl is the generic protagonist that first discovers that there's more than what's offered to her in this world thanks to her new friend showing her that. There are times when she could be a bit of a jerk, but for the most part, she's rather forgettable. As for the mom, she tries her best to make sure that everything in this girl's life goes in complete order, down to the point that she has scheduled everything about her life. In a normal world, she would be considered absolutely insane.
Because I've designed a plan. Your life plan. Hour of the day of the week of the month of the year of your life.
As for the Aviator, he's like a combination of the wise old man and the odd man out who's more different than everyone else because, well, he's not a businessman. But despite the combination, he's still a fully generic character. The only characters that actually are interesting are the ones found in the original story. They all have a sense of curiosity, whimsy, and mystery to them that makes them fascinating and makes it engaging the more you know them and the universe around the prince. Like the little prince himself, the Aviator in the story, the rose, the fox, the snake, and even the adults from the different asteroids. It is worth noting, however, that they only kept half of the adults in the movie, including the king, the conceited man, and the businessman. Unfortunately, they had to take out the drunkard, the lamplighter, and the geographer, which is too bad since they could have added something to this movie. Also, the film would even use the adults to a further extent, which is pretty cool at first, but then it just feels like they reduced them to something generic. It would have been great if we experienced more of the book's characters, but for the most part, we're left off with a few extra ones that aren't even worth remembering. I think it's safe to say that this may not be the best adaptation of the novel, but it did come out as a rather decent animated feature. The Little Prince might have its problems with adding elements to the novel that results in some bland characters, a story that's more distanced to the source material, and a message that feels rather forced, but it does make up a bit with the collaboration of computer and stop-motion animation, and whatever does come from the book works out very well. If you're expecting an actual adaptation of The Little Prince, then you might end up being rather disappointed. However, if you are curious to know what this movie has to offer and want to have a basic idea of what the novel is all about, then this might be a pretty good rental. Like I said, it could have been much worse, but with how big the story became, there are plenty of other options if you need a better fix of The Little Prince. That, or you can just simply stick to the book.